The humming forest. Mike Harrison loved the forest. After spending more than 20 years as a mountain ranger, he felt like he knew every rock, tree, and hidden corner of these woods. People jokingly called him the mountain ghost because he seemed to know every trail by heart, slipping into the forest at dawn and returning quietly, like he was a part of it. He'd always say that these woods were his backyard, his escape from the chaos of the outside world. It was a perfect early autumn morning, and Mike's plan was simple: a short hike up to Clear Point, a rest by the stream, and a final loop before dusk. The trees were alive with the colors of fall, red and orange leaves blanketing the ground. The crisp air filled his lungs, and he could hear nothing but the rustling leaves and his own footsteps. But as he was passing an old, narrow path he usually avoided, something caught his ear, a soft, strange humming. It was so faint he almost missed it, a low, constant hum that seemed to blend with the breeze. Mike stopped, listening. There was nothing else around, no animals, no birds. Just that hum. Curiosity got the better of him, so he decided to follow it. As he made his way along the path, the hum grew louder, pulsing in time with his steps. The trees were thicker here, older. There was a sense of quiet weight to the air, like the woods were holding their breath. The humming led him to a small clearing he'd never seen before. In the middle of the clearing, he froze. There, standing completely still, was a group of people, maybe a dozen, scattered around the clearing with their eyes closed. They were so still that, for a moment, he wondered if they were statues. "Hello," he called, his voice sounding strange and too loud against the quiet hum. Nobody answered. They just stood there, heads tilted slightly upward, like they were listening to something only they could hear. Mike moved closer, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. "Hey, are you okay?" he asked again, his voice almost a whisper now. He was close enough to see their faces, pale and serene, eyes shut tight. They didn't react, didn't move. He reached out to touch the shoulder of a young woman in a faded green jacket, but as his hand got closer, a cold shiver ran down his spine. Something felt wrong, deeply wrong. The hum grew louder, echoing inside his head, pressing against his thoughts until he felt dizzy. He took a step back, suddenly feeling the urge to get away from these people, from the sound, from this clearing. He turned and started back toward the path, but after only a few steps, he stopped. The way he'd come in was gone. Trees now surrounded him on all sides, blocking every trace of the path he'd walked just minutes ago.
Panicking, he turned back to the clearing. The people were still there, still motionless, their faces calm, unaware of him. The hum had become a part of him now, a low, pulsing rhythm in his mind. His head felt heavy, his legs shaky, like he was being pulled back toward them. Mike tried to shake the feeling, focusing on his breathing, on his training. He'd been in tough spots before, and he knew how to stay calm. It's just a trick of the forest, he told himself, just a quiet playing tricks. But even as he tried to believe it, he couldn't deny the growing sense that something was watching him. He forced himself to walk in a straight line, hoping he'd find the edge of the clearing, a way out. But the more he walked, the more the trees seemed to close in, guiding him in a circle, always leading him back to the clearing and the humming people. Hours passed. The sun began to sink behind the trees, casting long shadows across the clearing. Exhausted, he sat on the ground, clutching his head as the hum drilled deeper, almost like it was pulling memories from him. He could see flashes from his life-old friends, family, moments he hadn't thought of in years. His mind felt foggy, slipping away, as though he was being absorbed. He looked up, his eyes drifting to the people in the clearing. Something clicked in his mind, a horrifying realization. These weren't strangers lost in the woods. He recognized them. They were people who had disappeared over the years, hikers and campers who had gone missing without a trace. He remembered their faces from old reports and posters, names he'd spoken about in meetings, and now here they were, still, lifeless, caught in the hum. It took everything in him to stand up, to push against the weight pressing down on his mind. He forced himself to look away from the clearing, fixing his eyes on the edge of the forest, and started walking. Every step was a struggle, but he focused on one thought. He had to get out. The hum followed him. Even as he broke into a run, he didn't look back, didn't let himself listen to the voices he thought he heard calling his name from behind. The trees grew thinner, the air lighter, and suddenly he was back on the familiar trail, the hum finally fading. When he stumbled out of the woods, the last light of day was fading. His heart pounded, his mind still reeling. He knew he'd never be able to explain what had happened, not to anyone else, maybe not even to himself. But as he stood there, breathing in the cool air, he knew one thing for sure: the forest had let him go. This time, but that hum, he could still feel it, a quiet echo somewhere deep in his mind, a warning he would carry forever, and he knew he would never step foot on that path again.